Well, I am really, really excited that we are here together for shifting consciousness together. Like Linda was talking about, having a group focusing on positive things together really makes changes happen a lot more quickly. So today, what we're going to be talking about again is 6-dimensional type of thinking, feeling, and behaving states. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I think that's about in a moment, but before I do, I wanted to read something from Marianne Williamson. Probably most of you have already heard this, but I think it's such a good one to talk about one of the things that I think 6-dimensional consciousness is about, which is unity consciousness. So what she says is, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within all of us. It's not just in some of us. It is in everyone. And we must let our own light shine. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And so I really think that's really what it's all about, is to recognize that we want to use all of our gifts, we want to be our best self, and that we also want other people to be that as well. And so I think some of the challenges is when it's an ego type of thinking, oh, I'm good at this. It's when we want to be better than other people. When we think that we want to be best so that other people aren't doing as well, then I think that's not the kind of talent that we want to shine and exude. We want to bring everybody up to their highest level. So it's like, I want to be my best self, and I want you to be your best self, you, and you. So, and that's, I think, what this 6-dimensional consciousness is about. And I'm going to give you just, a lot of you have heard this already, but a template of what would explain the 6-dimensional consciousness a little bit better. So I think that before we became separate souls, that we were all a oneness field, which would mean that we're all one. And so what it looks like to me is, if we were to take all of our higher selves, let's say the spirit of everyone and everything, all consciousness and all the trillions of universes, and put it into one, that would be God or Source. And so let's say we as God or Source wanted to see what it was like to have all these different experiences as separate individuals. So we created a duplication or a hologram of self, and we brought it into many different existences. And it's anything from hate to love. So we created, let's say, trillions of universes, and the template I always use, and probably many do, is that Dimension 1 would be about hate, and Dimension 11 would be about love, and anything in between. And so Earth is roughly 3 to 4. And so you figure that we're on the lower vibrational end of things. And it's a temporary experience that we came to have. And so all of us here are bound to have both things that are difficult, things that we might be considered imperfect, negative, or however you want to think of them, and then we also have things that are very positive and very enlightened. And that's, none of us are going to be at the level that is all about light yet, because we're not in a vibratory state that makes that possible. And so you figure that we as humans here on Earth, we've gone through a lot of difficulties when you look at it. We've gone through, I was just thinking, even looking at Downton Abbey. Mark and I got into this whole thing about watching Downton Abbey. And I started thinking about just that little group of people that lived together, and, you know, it's like it was a big deal that somebody wanted to marry a Jewish person, you know, it was a really big deal. Or that somebody wanted to marry somebody that wasn't in the same class as them. And they didn't even talk about, they did talk about it. One woman kissed a black guy, and that was really not good in that era, you know. And then there wasn't even any mention. Oh, there was the Thomas, the man that was interested in men, which was considered totally immoral, but people were starting to see it was okay. And I started to think about that, and I thought, we've really come a long way when you think about it. You know, nobody really thinks about the class thing anymore much. And people can marry any color they want, and nobody blinks anymore. It's been like that, not for very long though, when you think about it. I think about in the 1950s and 60s, black people really couldn't, I think in the 50s, they couldn't walk on the same side of the street or even they had to be in the back of the bus. And so now we just take for granted that everybody can do what others can do. And we still have a ways to go, of course, but we've come a long way. And even thinking about it, that women couldn't vote until the 1920s, and then Mark was just telling me here that until 1973, women couldn't get a credit card on their own. And I didn't know that it wasn't that long ago. So I was just, in middle school, and women could just started being able to get their own credit cards. So when you think about it, that our consciousness is already rising. We look at all the different problems that are going on the planet, and there are a lot of them because we're still in polarity, but we're inching towards that sixth dimensional consciousness, just looking at how we're already more accepting of people being able to do things that they want to do. Men can marry men, women can marry women. That's just a really recent phenomenon, and people don't get very bent out of shape like they used to. Most people are pretty accepting of it. So when people start talking about that there's more problems on the earth, I agree, but then I also go back to that in 1920 we only had 1.2 billion people on the planet. Now we are inching up to 8 billion. So there's that many more people that are on the planet to have different things come up too. But if we go back to that template of dimension 1 being hate and dimension 11 being love, and that we're 3 to 4, I think a lot of us are talking about wanting to raise above that middle realm point. Now a lot of people are talking about moving into what they're calling 5th dimension, and everybody's got a little different take, and I don't think it really matters that much. But what I've always thought of anyway is that the 5th dimension is the split between the lower realms, which we are part of the lower realms, and the middle realms. And so I always think that we're moving from, let's say, 3rd to 4th to 6th. We're like crossing that barrier. You could think of the 5th dimension as being the birth canal. We're birthing into the 6th. And I thought it was perfect timing to start talking about 6D or 6th dimensional, because I think a lot of people are in the birth canal right now. I don't know how many of you have been feeling almost like more of your head can be really tense, your eyes feel heavy, your body sometimes feels like it could, like it could just break out and explode, almost like, you're just, it's like that the baby that's in the birth canal, that the head is getting kind of squished, things are, you're feeling your body trying to work its way out of something that was familiar, in utero, and all of a sudden you're pushing out into some whole new reality. And I'm sure that even moving out of the birth canal as a baby, you start crying. It's like, what's going on here? Where am I? So we really don't know what the 6D is about. And so that's part of what we're discovering together. I think that it's probably got some of the Buddhists, some of what the Buddhists talk about, where we're to be detached yet engaged. That's how I interpret what they're saying, that we want to take the middle path so that we're able to stay balanced and create a life where we're actually there for each other, but yet not maybe too high or too low, like where you can kind of move up and down in life, like you're not moving the roller coaster thing with the Buddhist teaching, where you're staying kind of more on that straight and narrow path to keep yourself feeling good and balanced and engaging in life without taking things on too much. So the path of suffering is when you're attached to things. And so what we're going to be talking about a lot this weekend too is moving out of our old thinking. So one thing that I've been noticing with people, probably at least for the last year, maybe 2 years, is that if we have rigid thinking, which we all do, me included of course, we all have rigid thinking. We think something is true. We're sure that this is the path to doing a particular thing. Like if I'm trying to let's say find something that, let's say a solution for something, you research everything and you try to figure out what you should be doing in a particular area. And at least for me, a lot of the time when I'm really attached to having a particular outcome and I'm researching it in a particular way, that what ends up happening is that I don't really get results very well. And what I've been seeing in people's fields is that it's almost like walls go up in the energy field when we're too limited. So in other words, if I have a rigid belief about something having a particular outcome, I'm actually putting a wall in my field so I can't get any other outcomes to come in. So that, you know, and you could even think of it, I remember reading once that the Native Americans didn't see the ships coming in from Europe because they'd never had seen a ship before, so it just never appeared in their vision. And you could even thinking of it that way, where if it's something that, if we're really fixed on something, we're not allowing anything else to come in just because our focus is just so narrow, we're not noticing things. So you could say it's a wall, it's not noticing, or however you want to look at it. So really what we want to do is to start thinking about opening up completely to something new. Not only just thinking positively about things, but also being open to something that's maybe magnificent and beyond our current understanding. And so what I've been thinking about with that is that a lot of the things that I think are probably outdated. And so I've been asking, and I go through different periods of my life where I feel like something just feels like I'm almost like I have a skin on that needs to shed. So I don't know if any of you can relate to that. But it's almost like you feel like you can almost like unzip yourself and just like burst out of it into a whole different atmosphere or something. So one of the things that I've been doing, and I've been suggesting to people too, is just to act like you know nothing. And anything that's supposed to stay with you will stay. But a lot of the things really are pretty outdated. Even things that seem like common sense, or is it really common sense, some of the things that we're believing? You know, it is because that's what everybody thinks, but we as a consciousness also create things together. So like Linda was talking about, if everybody's focusing on the same thing together, something different, we have different results. So I was doing a little experiment. Now, I always figured that our intuition is, as good as we're open to new possibilities. So I'm one of those people, I like to get my intuitive hunches, but I also like to have things make sense. So I've got that kind of thing going on with me too. So sometimes it works most of the time, but sometimes it can be limiting too. So I always, if I get something, sometimes I'll even research, did that really happen? And most of the time you see that it did, or is it going to, does it make sense later, that kind of a thing. But with the intuition, I typically see that the more open I get, that I'll get pieces of information that will come up, let's say 5 years down the road. All of a sudden you'll start hearing people talking about it, or there'll be books about it. Like even the whole idea that we're interconnected through a giant matrix or grid system. I remember thinking and talking about that back in like 1998, and I hadn't really heard about that before. And then all of a sudden Greg Braden writes a whole book on it, or Lynn McTaggart writes the book The Field, and so forth. So to me it looks like a spider web that we're all connected to together. We're connected via a whole giant spider web that connects everybody and everything together. And we've got influences by all these different souls that we're connected to. And most of you have heard that the ancestors we're connected to, and all the different lifetimes. And so the more we start changing our own thinking, we're actually helping to change the field or the thinking to everybody that we're most connected to. I do think that really, when I was thinking back at, I don't know if any of you remember what you felt like, let's say in the late 80s, early 90s, what your life was like. I think that was the start of things shifting. Some of you maybe, like Lynn probably was maybe 2. So you might not remember much about it.
I was just born.
Well, yeah, I was thinking 92 maybe, but yeah, maybe, yeah.
Oh,
so
89.
You were born in 89, so yeah, you were born in 2, 3, whatever. But, when I think about that time frame, for any of you that are a little older, that back then things were, and I've talked about this before with some of you, it was like, if you're trying to make change, it was like pushing a boulder up a hill, or a big mountain even. I still think of I remember back in the 80s, my aunt was really into the metaphysical, so she would give me the list of affirmations, like, I am perfect, in mental, emotional, and physical health, or whatever it was. I mean, she had this whole list of things, and I remember thinking at the end of them, I did them for like a year or 2. I thought, I didn't feel like much happened, because it was, pushing the boulder up the mountain, But now, like a lot of you were talking about, the intentions are manifesting a lot quicker, because we've made a critical mass shift. Back then, everybody was thinking a lot the same in ways that were more old and stale and not very thought-provoking. And it was just the start of people starting to wake up. And so it seems like once we hit 99, 2000, things started getting even faster. And I'd say since 2012, we've really started actively working towards what we're calling the 6D consciousness. And I remember thinking over entering the 6D, and then I realized that no, we're getting ready for the 6D because, I used to joke and say we're, kind of moving through hell, because really we've had to work through those kind of hellish things that are internally within us, because we all have them. You figure if we're only third to fourth dimension out of 11, and there's a lot of things that we've come to work through. So I think all of us that chose to be here at this time have really volunteered to start this consciousness movement together. Not everybody's doing it here on this planet, but I figured that because our souls are, I think all of us here would say that we're multi-dimension and multi-universe beings. So that means that our soul is having many experiences all at the same time. So you figure that even if somebody doesn't seem to be doing their work here on this planet, because we've got trillions of universes, that everybody somewhere is doing their work. And so you figure that if you take all of us that are doing our work together, what's going to happen? We're going to start shifting the vibration up more and more. And so that's always made me really pause, because there's always going to be people in your life that are difficult. But if you keep in mind that because we have so many things going on in so many places, that we're all the difficult ones somewhere, and that we as a consciousness are really moving towards a better present future together as a collective, as a multi-dimensional, multi-universe being, having these human and many experiences. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just take about, let's say, a 5-minute break if anybody wants to use the restroom, and I'm going to set up, we're going to do a guided imagery, and we're going to do something on starting that process of moving into 6D consciousness, and we're going to go to our council and those guides that have been working with us, and we're going to get more clarity about what the 6D means to us and what our path will be at this point.